Good afternoon, and thanks for tuning in to Politics and the Pulpit here on your hometown station, 98.1 FM and AM 1220. It is also Valentine's Day, a day that Hallmark and florists will get the most bang from your buck. If you're anything like my wife and I, we try to avoid the crowds on Valentine's Day by celebrating either the day before or days before, which we did. And, when we were younger, back in the mid-90s, when I was dating my wife, I ended up taking her to some place called Mariposa, which I guess means butterfly in Espanol. We ended up waiting like 2.5 hours, and that was the thing for me that said, no, I don't think I'll do this again. So if you're able to celebrate, maybe the day after or something like that, or maybe have a home-cooked meal, I'm sure you'll enjoy yourself much more than actually waiting in a long, long lie. But either way, hope you and your spouse have a wonderful and safe Valentine's celebration as you hand her that $100 bouquet of roses that you probably could have purchased for $50 just 3 days earlier. But yay to capitalism, right? On the show today, at the bottom of the hour, will be Suzette Valladares will be calling in at the bottom, and she'll be talking about her race for California State Senate District 23. Should Susette win, she would be replacing outgoing State Senator Scott Wilk. And so we'll talk a little bit about the campaign leading up to March 5th and then, of course, on to November. Well, have you heard about the shooting over the weekend at Lakewood Church, pastored by megachurch pastor Joel Osteen, which I believe happened on Sunday? Again, have you heard about it? It's possible you may have, but could the reason be that you may not have heard about it is because the alleged identity of the shooter and the shooter's political ties tend to go against the narrative of the mainstream media? I think so. Now, there is some debate as to whether or not the shooter was indeed trans, but we do know that the shooter went by both male and female names, and that the shooter had some anti-Semitic writings and posts, and I believe, according to some reports, yelled pro-Palestinian slogans before being shot by an armed off-duty cop who attends Lakewood Church. Now, could this be the beginnings of what some are calling trans terrorism against evangelical churches, which, by the way, more conservative evangelical churches, more fundamental evangelical churches tend to be the ones who, take the Bible literally and preach without apology. But again, I'm not sure, but I'll bet you're still waiting for the manifesto from the Nashville trans shooter that occurred several months ago. And you're probably thinking, well, that just so happened to be a Christian private school as well, by the way, where children were targeted and killed. And again, not sure if what occurred at Lakewood Church over the weekend is a trans trend, but I do find it hilarious how the media treated this story as opposed to if this individual were a Republican, right-wing Christian who voted for Trump. And I'm sure if this individual were indeed described as that, the loop in the news would be 24/7 about this story. You would not stop hearing about this for at least the next 3, 4, 5, 6 days, week tops. So what about this foreign aid bill that just got passed via the Senate and looks like it's going to die a very slow death in the House? It passed by about a 79 vote margin, and it contains a clause that could potentially see Trump get impeached for a third time should he win the presidency again. Ohio Senator J.D. Vance distributed a memo to the Senate GOP arguing in his memo that the foreign aid measure passed by the Senate could potentially tie Trump's hands if he comes into office next year. In other words, the aid to Ukraine, should it pass the House and then ultimately get signed by the president, the aid to Ukraine expires 9 months into the next presidency, thus effectively handcuffing Trump from stopping any aid lest he face an impeachment inquiry. Now, to be fair, there are some guys on the conservative right who think that the memo that J.D. Vance put out is a bit of a stretch on this particular part of the foreign aid, the measure, if you will. Guys like Ben Shapiro and others have said that Vance might be stretching this. But what I find more interesting, other than whether or not this measure does or doesn't exist within this foreign aid package, is what I find even more interesting and even more newsworthy is just how certain some in our government feel that Trump is indeed going to win in November, thus adding these legislative obstacles from allowing Trump to make an independent decision on whether to even continue aid to Ukraine. And by the way, just newsflash, over the last 24 hours here and really this morning, a bunch of stuff just came out in reference to Obama and Hillary Clinton and Brennan and others in reference to what they did behind the scenes with Ukraine and how that relates to Trump, especially during Trump's first term and all of the debacle. Remember, the first impeachment was about what? About the phone call to Zelensky and the whole Ukraine situation. Do you remember when Russia came into Crimea back in, I don't know, what is it, 2008, 2009? I think that was at the heels of John McCain ultimately getting his rear end handed to him when Barack Obama won decidedly in that election. Nobody really cared. I mean, Barack Obama didn't care. There wasn't much kerfuffle about Russia going into Crimea, which is, parts of Ukraine. And here we are, a decade later, more than a decade later, and now all the Democrats and yes, a pretty good stack of Republicans are all waving the pom-poms for Ukraine, Ukraine, Ukraine. See, there's some stuff coming out right now that is tying these guys to money and all kinds of sleazy things with Zelensky and others that, frankly, I think kind of proves the point why some of our conservative friends, our ultra-conservative friends on the right, don't want any more aid going to Ukraine, because it's more than just providing munitions and things of that nature. There could be potentially a great cover-up that is being, if you will, literally uncovered before our very eyes. And again, I can't give you all the details because I don't know all the details myself, but I can tell you that there is definitely some news breaking about that. But one of the things that I find interesting is this is not the first piece of legislation that the Senate has potentially passed that have these little ticking time bombs in them for former President Trump. It tells me that the deep state in both parties, and yes, the deep state is entrenched in both parties, Democrats and Republicans, it tells me that the deep state is scared to death of Trump. I don't think I can think of any other president in my lifetime that elicits so much fear from both parties. However, credit where credit is due. Let me also just say this, because Biden has done something that virtually no other president has been able to do. And by the way, this coming from my lips is going to be amazing. Listen, Biden has done something that virtually no other president, Republican or Democrat, has ever been able to do. And that is to get Democrats, Republicans, and independents to agree that Biden is too old and feeble to win another term. By a whopping 86%, according to ABC Ipsos poll. And just to be fair, and again, want to be fair here, in that same poll, some 59% thought Trump was too old. But it goes to show you that you can be 81 years old, but not seem like you're 81 years old. There are people that attend Freedom's Way Baptist Church that are in their mid-80s that function very well, that communicate very well, that still drive a vehicle and function in a very normal way. We have people, like I said, in their 80s that are doing very well, that can talk. But yet, what's happening with President Biden is he is an old 81. He is a feeble 81. And when you compare and contrast him to former President Trump, who is 77 years old, Trump doesn't seem like an old 77. He seems like he's in his mid-60s, really. But 86%, that's a big number, folks. How does the White House spin 86%? That is quite a majority, folks. And this poll, by the way, comes in the wake of Biden and that disastrous impromptu news conference that he held last Thursday as he attempted to answer questions concerning the DOJ's Her report. And more news just came out the other day where the Department of Justice Her said that Biden was very sloppy in his managing of classified documents, and much of these documents were simply placed in shabbily kept boxes in his garage or at his UPenn office. But yet, if you remember last Thursday, in trying to somehow strike a distinction between Biden's handling of the classified documents and Trump's, Biden said, quote, the documents he possessed were under lock and key in filing cabinets. The problem is that the Department of Justice has pictures of Biden's classified documents in his garage as he's backing in his vehicle. It's just simply not true. Some of these classified documents were put in boxes that were, they were about to fall apart, And yet, Biden is going to assert that somehow his situation and his classified docs situation is far different from former President Trump's. And I frankly don't see the difference at all. And the other thing, too, is Biden doesn't know when he acquired most of his documents. And that's something that I guess we're going to see in the DOJ documents if they all get released to where we can actually see Biden's conversation with her and the other guys about whether or not he actually remembered acquiring these documents. You see, the fact is, folks, we're being played right now by the Department of Justice, and we're being played by the White House. And what you need to do is look past what Karine Jean-Pierre is saying and others, because they're trying to tell you stop believing what you see and stop believing what you clearly hear. If you watched that news conference last Thursday, obviously it was later in the evening, so you could tell that Biden probably would have been in bed normally. And he tried to come out like a bull in a china closet and try to assert himself and answer a few questions. And some of the questions were geared upon what was said in this Her report about him being an old individual who could not remember some things. And then Biden proved it by when it seemed like the conference was going to end, he kind of wandered around a bit and then finally came back to the dais and started to talk about the president of Mexico and the president of Egypt and got that all mixed up. Now, folks, trust me, I speak for a living. I get things mixed up all the time. My tongue twists. I totally get it. But there's a difference between tongue twisting and forgetting a few details from actually having a mental deficiency, which, by the way, is not something that we as Christian conservatives should relish. In many ways, I think it's cruel and a bit unusual. Maybe not unusual for the Democratic Party, but definitely cruel to put this man out there. And there's a lot of talk right now about whether or not Jill Biden, because she's probably going to be the only one that is going to be able to convince Biden to either step down or to just, pass the baton to Kamala, ugh on that one. But Jill is the one. She's Dr. Jill Biden. Dr. Jill Biden is the one that's going to have to talk to Joe and say, listen, for the good of the country, you need to step aside. And so I don't know what's going to happen. Really, in the back of my mind, I've thought that there was going to be some sort of switch with Biden before the convention. And I think since Biden's performance last Thursday at that presser, I really think that it's only fueled the fire behind that thought process going into the Democratic convention this coming summer, because somebody is going to replace former President Biden. Something is going to happen, and it's not getting any better for him. And folks, I think it would be best for our country if he would step aside. And, maybe we have to endure Kamala Harris for about, maybe a few months, and then we'll see what happens. When we come back here on Politics in the Pulpit, we'll be joined by Suzette Valladares as she's running for District 23 here on your hometown station. All right, we're back here live on Politics in the Pulpit. This is your holy host, Pastor Jerry Cook, here on your hometown station, 98.1 FM and AM 1220. Quick shameless plug here. If you want to listen to Freedom's Way Baptist Church on the weekend, you can here on the Faith and Freedom Hour every Sunday at 8 a.m. And we've cut the service to where you're just going to hear the preaching. And so encourage you to listen in every Sunday, Faith and Freedom Hour here on KHTS. Also, if you want to come visit our church, you can always go to freedomswaybaptistchurch.org. Check us out online, and then, of course, come and visit us anytime. We have services at 9:15 for Sunday School, all ages, 10:30 a.m., main worship, 5 p.m. in the evening, and then, of course, we have a midweek service on Wednesdays as well. How many of you remember the name Rachel Dolezal? Do you remember a few years ago there was this big brouhaha about a woman who was white who identified as black? Now seriously, if she would have just done this a few years later, it would have been totally acceptable, right? But there was a big deal about this, and black people came out and said, this ain't right, and stop identifying as black, and so on and so forth. But we haven't heard much about Rachel Dolezal for a few years now, but it just came up yesterday in the news cycle that an Arizona teacher has lost her job after it was revealed that she had been posting sexually suggestive content on OnlyFans. By the way, this pastor does not have an OnlyFans site. In this day and age, this type of story isn't all that shocking. There have been several reports of teachers getting into hot water for engaging in these types of, if you will, extracurricular activities. But in this case, the teacher is none other than Rachel Dolezal, a white, former NAACP leader who spent years fooling people into believing that she was black. Folks, you can't make this stuff up. She lost her job at the Catalina Foothill School District in Tucson, Arizona. And it said that was because of the use of the social media in the OnlyFans thing was against their district's policy. I should hope so. But yet, there can be pornography and all kinds of pornographic material in the school library, and that's totally okay. But apparently, after being disgraced due to her racial appropriation, Dolezal changed her name to Diallo. Interesting. The woman who resigned as head of the NAACP chapter in 2015 after misrepresenting herself as black. Rachel Dolezal was working for the Catalina Foothills School District until district officials learned Tuesday of social media content under her current name. Folks, you can't make this stuff up. I mean, again, this woman probably would not have had the same problem coming out as, quote, identifying as black today as maybe she would have, a few years ago. 2015 seems like an awfully long time. We talk about the good old days. 2015, could it be that 2015 is the good old days, not the 1950s anymore? But anyway, how have you heard of this story here? Washington Democrat lawmakers introduce Hamas amendment to Holocaust education bill. Now think about that. Democratic state lawmakers in Washington have slipped a pro-Hamas amendment into a bill that is designed to ensure that K through 12 students are educated about the Holocaust. Okay, well, nothing wrong with the Holocaust and teaching about that, but you read that right. Progressives in the state thought it was a good idea to take a measure designed to teach about the history of oppression against the Jewish people and insert material intended to imply that Israel is committing genocide against the Palestinians in Gaza, which is yet another way the far left is injecting its brand of anti-Semitism into education. Needless to say, this move has generated robust debate over the issue of genocide and how the education system is failing students. And this is called House Bill 2037 and was a companion to Senate bill introduced by State Senator John Braun that mandates public schools introduce lessons on the Holocaust and other genocides during the month of April, which is International Genocide Prevention and Awareness Month. It's amazing. Every month's got some sort of weird, wacky thing. This legislation was not controversial, fueled by Republican concerns that 1 in 5 young Americans do not believe the Holocaust happened. Who is teaching that the Holocaust never happened? I mean, seriously, who's teaching that? I mean, we have a Holocaust survivor that's supposed to be presenting some material here pretty soon here in Santa Clarita. I think next week. I think a week from this Sunday. 101-year-old man that was, I think, at Dachau. And what do you do? What do you do with all the people that are still survivors that have the marks on their hands or on their forearms that said that they were a part of the Holocaust? They were in those prison camps. So people that are saying that the Holocaust did not occur or that it was exaggerated are just absolutely silly. The amendment, which ostensibly intended to expand the focus of the legislation to include the impact of genocides and diasporic communities. In other words, if they're going to teach about the Holocaust, according to this amendment, you also have to give equal time to, quote, what the Jews are doing to Hamas. Now, we've talked about this whole potential two-state solution thing, and we know that ultimately that's probably never going to happen on this side of eternity. But the fact is, folks, if they cannot get a Hamas bill in there, they're going to do their best to somehow placate Hamas by at least putting this type of legislation out there. We're still waiting for our guest Suzette Valladares to give a call in, but I wanted to read this new bombshell report that just came out today. Obama CIA triggered the Russia collusion hoax. I mentioned this earlier during the first half hour, and many of us thought to ourselves, what a strange thing for the Democrats and even the Republicans to go at President Trump as hard as they did during his first term. This is a story from Red State. It says this: Fox's Jesse Waters featured a bombshell story from Michael Schellenberger and Matt Taibbi. And by the way, both of those guys sat before Congress and were whistleblowers on the whole Twitter files. And of course, they were totally made fun of and supposedly debunked by the Democrats, which of course is not true. But this was a bombshell story from Michael Schellenberger and Matt Taibbi on his show on Tuesday, that the Obama CIA had foreign allies surveil Trump aides, setting off the Russian collusion hoax. And by the way, if you want to listen to a lot of this stuff, Dan Bongino has been doing a great job just really laying out, I think even to his own peril, laying out this whole Russian collusion hoax. The official story to this point has been that Australian officials informed U.S. officials that a Trump aide told an Australian diplomat that Russia had damaging information on Hillary Clinton. In truth, the U.S. asked the Five Eyes intelligence allegiance to surveil Trump's associates and share the intelligence they acquired with U.S. agencies. And after public and had been told that the President Barack Obama CIA Director John Brennan had identified 26 Trump associates for the Five Eyes to target, a source confirmed that the IC had identified them as people to bump or make contact with or manipulate. They were targets of their own IC and law enforcement, targets for collection and misinformation. So, that was how the, quote, suspicious information was picked up and then backed up to the U.S. officials to ultimately be investigated by the FBI. And the question is, how long had that been going for? It went back to March of 2016, before President Donald Trump actually took the oath of office. They had all of this stuff laid out in spades, folks. Why? In anticipation, should Hillary not win. I know, it's weird, huh? They actually thought that it's a possibility that that Hillary may not win. Something interesting. And this thing is rabid, folks. These guys had this thing in play way before Trump took office, and they were going to use this as their leverage and then ultimately their takedown of former President Trump. But the fact is, we know that he ultimately did not back down. In fact, probably one of the most fightingest Republican presidents we've seen in as many years, no doubt about it. How many of you heard the story of that Russia is to put nuclear weapons in space? Interesting story that just broke today. The House Intelligence Committee chairman is warning of a new national security threat and is asking Joe Biden to declassify the threat so that it can be openly discussed. Now, I find this interesting that this information came out just a few days after Tucker Carlson interviewed Vladimir Putin on X. And of course, there's all kinds of stories about whether Vladimir Putin is going to, whether he has some sort of collusion relationship with Tucker Carlson. Who knows what's going on there? I know that some of the views that Tucker has on Ukraine and Russia are completely different from the mainstream Republicans out there. But, you can have an opinion, right? At least I hope you can. But the fact is, here comes this information that the House Intel chairman warns of new national security threat, highly concerning and destabilizing. Funny stuff. Now here's an update on that. It says, source tells Fox the material Turner is asking the Biden administration to declassify deals with concerning Russian capability. The potential seriousness of the threat is grave. However, the threat is not immediate in nature. NSA Sullivan today on whether Americans should be worried. I think in a way that question it is impossible to answer with a straight yes, because Americans understand that there are a range of threats and challenges in the world that we're dealing with every single day. Now, ABC News is reporting that this grave threat is about Russia wanting to put nuclear weapons in space. And again, we don't know, because a lot of this stuff is breaking as we speak, frankly. But I know that the pom-poms have been out for Ukraine, and the death nails have been out for Putin for, in as many years as Trump was in office. How many remember that Obama and Hillary had a real cozy relationship with Vladimir Putin during the Obama administration? If you all remember, it was Obama during potentially his second term when he whispered to the shadow president of Russia at the time, saying, "You tell Vlad that after I win this election, I'll have a lot more leverage with him." You know, words to that effect, kind of paraphrasing a bit. And what were they talking about? What leverage was Barack Obama talking about? Folks, I'm telling you, there are things happening behind the scenes that are very dark, very insidious. You know what the Bible says in the book of Ephesians? The Bible says that Satan is the prince and power of the air. And in Ephesians chapter 6, the Apostle Paul reminds us that our battle is not against flesh and blood, that is, against you and me as mortal individuals, but our battle is against principalities, against rulers of the darkness in this world. And it's important for us to remember that what animates these people to do what they do is more than just their fertile, progressive, leftist mind. There's something more. There is something far sinister, something darker that is animating this stuff. And whether you believe or choose to believe the Bible or not, the fact remains, we are living in a time when lawlessness is being made to seem regular and lawfulness is made to seem strange, out of step, and yesterday. Last night I had the privilege of attending one of the debates for the district attorney, and there were 12 people up there, folks. And it got a little, to be honest with you, got a little taxing on me. It started at 6 o'clock, and I left around 7:30 or so, but it didn't end until about 8:15ish. And all I can tell you is I'm sure that just about everybody that was on that dais last night would be much better than George Gascon. But the fact is, folks, what is happening in the DA's office here in Los Angeles County, what has happened in the DA's office up in San Francisco, is ostensibly trying to normalize bad behavior, and anybody who recognizes that bad behavior is seen as somebody who is out of step and is a Neanderthal and is some knuckle-dragging right-wing conspiracy nut who really needs to be relegated to the Stone Age. And it's just going to get worse and worse and worse unless you and I, regular individuals, get tougher, spiritually speaking, and push back on this stuff. You've heard me say for now the last couple of years here on this program, we need pastors to talk and preach behind the pulpit the things that they perhaps thought were more uncomfortable to preach about 3, 4, 5 years ago. We've got pastors that are just not dealing with these issues. I had a family come to my church just last Sunday who got discouraged by a local pastor here in Santa Clarita during Pride Month last year when, Pride Month was being pushed in a way that probably hadn't been pushed as much in years past. And this family just simply inquired of the pastor and said, "Would you please preach on these topics? Would you please tell us how we're to deal with this?" I'll tell you more about the answer to that in just a second here on Politics in the Pulpit. All right, we're back here live on Politics in the Pulpit with your holy host, Pastor Jerry Cook. Good to have you here today, and this is our final segment of the day. And finally, we're able to say hello to Suzette Valladares. Say hello out there.
Why, hello there, Pastor Cook, and to all your amazing listeners. Thank you so much for having me on today.
Well, we're going to make it a brief section right now because obviously you were busy, and that's the way it is. You should be busy. And calling into radio shows and things like that, sometimes can be overlooked, but that's okay. We're glad to have you on today. Wanted to real quickly just kind of give the listeners an idea of just how big an area and what cities encompass District 23, if you would.
Yeah, and before I get into that really quickly, you're absolutely right. We are busy as candidates. What they don't tell you when you're going to run for office is you spend the majority of your time on the phone asking people for money. So that's what I've been doing all day today, and I've been asking people for money because I'm running for the 23rd Senate District, which includes Santa Clarita, all of Santa Clarita. It was in the last redistricting split up, but now we are whole. And it goes all the way up to the Kern County line, so everything from Acton, Agua Dulce, Palmdale, Lancaster, the Kern County line, and then we pull east, picking up Adelanto, Hesperia, and about half of the city of Victorville. Geographically, it is a massive district, about an hour and a half from the southern tip to the northeastern tip, and I will be representing about 900,000 people.
Wow, that is definitely a huge area, and I've driven most of it, and a lot of it is just high desert.
There is a lot of, there is a lot of land in between, a lot of where our dense populations are, yes.
Absolutely. Well, let me ask you a question. What do voters need to know about your Democratic opponent, Kip Mueller?
Well, what you should know is that if you are sick of what's happening in this state, and anything from you are struggling with the cost of gasoline, with, if you're anything like me, my thermostat all winter has been at 66 and I've been wearing a sweater. Man, does that feel like, like we're back in the 70s and Carter's telling us to wear sweaters.
Yeah.
Whether you're frustrated with the price tag at the end of checkout at the groceries, whether you're frustrated with the taxes that you are most likely going to owe this year. Right now, we know that the state is in crisis when it comes to affordability. My opponent will wholeheartedly increase taxes, especially now that the state is facing a deficit. Democrats have no idea how to run businesses or yet alone how to run a state. And the only thing they're going to be able to do to get out of this deficit we're having is raise taxes, because they don't know how to cut taxes or cut regulations. So you can expect more of the same from my opponent.
Well, we definitely don't want to keep Kip out of there. We want to cut him out. But what will you be laser focused on, Suzette, should you win this seat in November and the people put you up there?
Yeah, so, the things that I focused on while I was in the assembly and will continue to focus on your Senate as your senator will be reducing the cost of living, making sure that families, can send their child to a quality education, right? Whether that is homeschool, whether that is a charter school, whether that is a private school or functional working traditional public education. I will ensure that parents have that access while protecting parental rights, right? There has been this huge infringement on parental rights. I have a 6-year-old. I will raise my 6-year-old until she is an adult and even then some, but the government should not be telling parents what to do. And lastly, and I think, most notably, what we're seeing is this rise in crime. And California is no longer the California I grew up in, where I can let my daughter go play in the street with our neighbor friends by themselves, because of crime, because of a woke DA and woke public policy that's being pushed from Sacramento that no longer keep our kids safe, that make them targets for human traffickers, for sex traffickers, that make them targets for crime. That has got to stop, and you can guarantee I will continue to be a strong voice to hold criminals accountable, to make sure that our kids are safe, our neighborhoods are safe, and that's so we don't have to go shopping for deodorant and asking someone to unlock the glass case that it's behind. It's out of control in California, and I will be a voice for accountability.
The great Ronald Reagan used to have what he called the 11th commandment, where he said, "Thou shalt not speak ill of another Republican," so I'm not going to ask you to speak ill. But with that said, you have another Republican running for this same seat named DJ Hamburger. I've spent some time with DJ. He's a charming and nice gentleman. But what differentiates you, Suzette, from DJ?
Yeah, I have always taken the Reagan rule very seriously, but my mama also taught me that you never start a fight, but when someone throws the first punch, you punch back. And there is a stark contrast between DJ and myself. I would say that I am ready to lead and ready to legislate on day one, having the experience that I have in the legislature, having run a small business and nonprofits, being a parent who truly knows the importance of being a parental voice and parental rights. And lastly, being a true fiscal conservative. Unfortunately, my opponent has supported tax increases in the past, including the largest tax increase that California has ever seen in Prop 98. I am somebody who has proven to be a fiscal conservative, which is what we need now more than ever, and that will continue.
I understand you, along with John Hatami and others, will be doing a bus tour of some sort on March 1st across the Antelope Valley. Tell the listeners a little bit about what that is.
Yeah, we are going to be doing what I am calling a vote fest, right? Because we've got to get ballots in. My assembly race was a prime example. I lost by 522 votes. 37,000 Republicans did not vote in that election. And they didn't vote for a variety of reasons, whether it was rain on the final day. But for me, Republicans now have our ballots for 30 days. 30 days, and some of us longer than that. We can get those ballots in, and it is so vital because you never know what's going to happen on election day. Vote early. So we're going to be in Aspinall, Dulce. We're going to be in Palmdale. We're going to be in Lancaster, doing kind of a vote fest, and meeting with voters and collecting ballots, so that, if you're giving it to me, you're giving it to John Hatami, that it's going to be safe because we want those ballots in. We will be releasing that information in the near future on where our stops are going to be. And it's going to be exciting time to meet with voters right before March 5th, the Tuesday election.
Yeah, I'm encouraging our folks, both at our church as well as all the people that I have contact with here in Santa Cruz, to go ahead and do the exact opposite of we as Republicans been saying for years, which is vote early. And we think that it's good to when the Democrats have a leg up with these numbers early on, it would be best if our Republican candidates can have a leg up going into the election as well. So encouraging folks to vote early. I'm sure you're doing the same thing. But where can folks go to donate and volunteer for Suzette's campaign?
Yes, you can learn more about me at my website at SuzetteValladares.com. You can find out about the issues, about some of the policies that I have led. You can sign up to volunteer, and you can donate. At the end of the day, Pastor Cook, I've always said, whether it's you're trying to find the cure for cancer, whether you have the best product that will ever hit the market, or you're the best candidate that can truly work on the real policy solutions for our issues, unless you have money, you cannot get any of those things out there. The same thing as a candidate, which is what I was doing all day today, raising money. Everything counts, from $5 to $5,500, which is the maximum amount that someone can contribute. That's how we as candidates get our message out and talk to voters. Every donation matters.
Well, absolutely. Thank you so much for joining us today on Politics The Pulpit today, Suzette, and we'll be praying for your campaign. Look forward to seeing you soon.
Thank you. Likewise. God bless. See you guys soon.
All right, take care. Next week here on Politics The Pulpit, we'll be welcoming Eric Early, running for state senator here. Actually, U.S. senator, excuse me. And we'll talk about the distinctions between him and Steve Garvey on Politics in the Pulpit.